Hi friends, welcome to Read Poetry and Eventually Die, episode number one. Episode number one, and that means that is the first episode. This is the beginning of something. It could be the beginning of something. Right now, I'm looking out at the blue sky. It's about clear sky. I'm next to Charlie Dog. Charlie Dog at Boost House here in Maine, Brunswick, Maine, is the current location of Boost House, although that's going to be in transition soon. Keep your eyes out peeled about that. Let me talk about the existence of this show, and then I'm going to talk about a book. I'm going to talk about Dean Atta's poetry today. Dean Atta is a poet from London who I've known on Twitter for a while and just got his book a few months ago and finally read it and want to share about it and try to give you a taste of Dean Atta's poetry. And I guess I'll start talking about this, that what I want to do with this show is give you a taste of all these different poets. You know, am I going to review books? Kind of. But it's not like I'm going to try to tell you, like, this book is good, this book is not good. I recommend this book rather than that book. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like, I read this book and I got a feel for who this poet is, what this poetry is like. And I'll try to convey that to you through directly quoting the work, through reading some of the poems, sometimes through playing recordings of the poet reading their own work, sometimes pointing out patterns, themes in the books, trying to describe the style to you so you can sort of just get a feel for it. And other things I want to do with this show, I want to contribute to the discourse about poetry. What poetry we read, the poetry that gets the attention, I want to have some say in that. I want to pull some attention to certain authors who I think deserve it. I also want to sort of contribute to how we read poetry and what we try to get from it. And just sort of like, I don't know what y'all's experience was with poetry when you were in school, but I'm talking about going back to high school or even earlier maybe, but in high school for me, I remember I was given a worksheet to help me analyze poetry by, I think, Shakespeare and some others that are from the old dead canon and all that. And it was really like, I didn't really like it that much because it was like, I was shown the idea of a poem as something you need to decipher and figure out the meaning, and the meaning is sort of the answer. It's sort of like, that was the way that I looked at it. And so I really actually got frustrated with that, and I eventually found E.E. Cummings, right? And E.E. Cummings does things differently than a lot of the other canonized poets in a bunch of different ways. Visually on the page it's spread out differently and different stuff like that. But one thing that really changed my life, actually, in terms of how I looked at poetry, was this poem that I encountered by E.E. Cummings, that I perceived it to be meaningless at first. I was like, this must be meaningless, this poem, because I read it and I didn't understand what was happening in it. It just seemed really messed up. I can tell you what book it was, what poem it was. It was from Cummings' book, Is Five. And the poem was called Ike Goldberg's Worth I'm. And I realize now, looking back, it's sort of like a social commentary on like the advertising type of lingo and stuff that Cummings often sometimes criticized with other work of his too. So it's sort of satirical, it's social commentary. But at the time, I was just reading it and I was like, this is goofy. The capitalization is all messed up. It's just kind of rhyming and goofy and wacky. And I took that poem as proof that there was no meaning in that. I'm like, there cannot be meaning in this. Of course, there ended up that there was, probably with the social commentary. But at the time, I was, with my limited idea of what meaning meant, meaning, I was like, this doesn't mean anything. It can't mean anything. And so then what? If a poem doesn't mean something, if there isn't a single message to decipher out of the poem and crack it open and get that prize inside, then what do you do? Where does that leave you? And that was the beginning of that was the beginning of me appreciating poetry for what it is, That was the beginning of me saying, okay, if I can't pull out a message out of this poem, maybe then I've just got to appreciate it for what it is on the surface. I can appreciate what it looks like. I can appreciate the humor that I find in certain lines, certain combinations of words, and I can just appreciate the sounds of the language. And I can appreciate, the images that it conjures in my head. And I can sort of just appreciate it without knowing the meaning. Without getting any meaning. And I think that is a very productive sort of lens to have for poetry and for other art and for other things in life. I mean, to just go through life and to have that perspective of sometimes things aren't going to really make sense, but you can still just appreciate various things at any moment. There's so much there to appreciate and to notice and to find interest in. And so I am interested in showing and modeling and demonstrating the interest that can be found in any poetic text, Even if you don't like the poetry that much, any text that you have in front of you, there's stuff to appreciate and there's stuff to be interested by. Even if you think it's bad, quote unquote, which I probably won't use that phrasing that much, but even if you think that it wasn't that well written or things are cliche or whatever, there's always something to look for and to find. And I think this will help repair some people's idea of poetry and help people find enjoyment in poetry, which they otherwise probably didn't. So that's one thing. I mean, there's so many people saying poetry's dead. Oh my God, what will we do? Poetry's dead. There's been a lot of articles written about that. That's something that sort of a cliche thing to say now, that poetry is dead, or, poetry is not dead. I guess I am on the side that poetry is not dead, but it's not really because poetry. There is exciting things happening in poetry with the internet and all, but, the main thing is that poetry isn't dead or alive, it's you that is either dead or alive, whether you choose to find interest in what is there. The leaves outside are starting to change. That's to be expected this time of year. It's late September and I'm in Maine, USA. But I haven't been noticing it that much lately. I've been walking down the street and I haven't been noticing it that much. And I've been like, okay, well, it is fall, it is early fall, I guess. But I'm not noticing that the colors are changing of the trees. But now I do notice out the window, I see a couple trees. And, certain trees change faster than others. And I would like to learn about this. I'd like to learn why. Why, Charlie? Charlie dog. Charlie is curled up in a little ball. Charlie is the cutest dog. I should actually address this right now because Charlie is shaking. She's a little shaking dog. She is a Chihuahua dog. And she is also small. And this is something that needs to be addressed in probably every media, that this dog is small. And we included in our poetry anthology, if you know of the YOLO Pages poetry anthology we put out this spring, there's pictures of Charlie in the book. There's pictures of Charlie dog. Because it's poetry. Because it brings to life. It brings life to life. It brings everything to life. Now Charlie, I've covered Charlie with a plaid blanket, and now Charlie is still small and seems to be a little warmer, but she's also in the sun, which will help. But anyway, leaves are changing. What was I saying about the poetry? Probably the poetry. Poetry's not dead. You're dead. That's what I wanted to say. You're dead. Okay, so one other thing I want to say about what this show is about, why I'm doing this show, is just a personal reason. I want to just check in on a personal level, and that is, I actually love reading poetry, especially aloud. When I allow myself time for it, when I allot myself the time and I sit down and I do it, I love it. I used to read 20 pages of poetry every day aloud. And it's just a beautiful thing. So I'm going to talk about Dean Atta. Dean Atta. Let me just read. I'll read the bio from the front of the book that I have. Dean Atta is a writer and performance poet. He has been commissioned to write poems for And then it has a bunch of different like museums and galleries. That's an interesting angle, commissioned to write poems. I don't see that often. I certainly have not been commissioned by museums and stuff. Atta won the 2012 London Poetry Award and was named as one of the most influential LGBT people by the Independent on Sunday Pink List 2012. An ambassador for the Spirit of London Awards, he lives in London and teaches writing workshops across the UK. So the main text I want to discuss in relation to Dean Atta is his 2013 release on the Westbourne Press, and the book title includes a racial slur in it. I guess I'm not going to say it. I couldn't decide if I should say it and censor it or talk around it in a way, but I think I'm just going to play the clip of Dean reading the poem. This is a good poem for you to hear in Dean's voice because it is the poem that the book is named after, and it's also, I think it's probably his most popular poem from looking around online. This poem got passed around online quite a bit. So here is Dean Atta reciting the title poem of this book.
I am nobody's nigger. Rappers, when you use the word nigger, remember that's one of the last words Stephen Lawrence heard. So don't tell me it's a reclaimed word. I am nobody's nigger, so please let my ancestors rest in peace, not turning their graves in Jamaican plantations or the watery graves of the slave trade, thrown overboard into the Middle Passage just for insurance claims. They were chained up on a boat, as many as they could manage and stay afloat, stripped of dignity and all hope, awaiting their masters and European names. But the sick and the injured were dead weight to toss, and Lloyd's of London would cover that cost. I am nobody's nigger, so you can tell Wheezy and Drake that they made a mistake. I am nobody's nigger now, so you can tell Kanye and Jigga I am not a nigger in Paris. I'm not a nigger in London, I'm not a nigger in New York, I'm not a nigger in Kingston, I'm not a nigger in Accra, or a nigger with attitude in Compton, 'cause I don't want to be called yo nigger. How were you raised on Public Enemy and still became your own worst enemy? You killed hip-hop and resurrected headless zombies that can't think for themselves or see where they're going or quench the bloodlust because there's no blood flowing in their hearts, just in the streets. They don't give a damn as long as they're eating. Their hearts ain't beating, they're as cold as ice bling because they would put money over everything. Money over self-respect or self-esteem or empowering the youth to follow their dreams. Stacking paper 'cause it's greater than love it seems. Call me nigger 'cause you're scared of what brother means. To know that we share something unspeakable. To know that as high as we rise we are not seen as equal. To know that racism is institutional thinking. And that nigger is the last word you heard before a lynching.
This book is 90-some pages long. It's mostly in a standard font size, left-aligned, mostly standard spelling and punctuation and capitalization, except there are some places where the spelling sort of embodies a vernacular. There's rhyme. There's prominent rhyme, and this is interesting because I don't read usually a lot of poetry that has rhyme. The rhyme is a lot of fun. I really like the way that it ends certain poems. There's certain poems that end in a way that feel like boom. It feels like they're slammed closed. They have a strong ending because of the rhyme. Like it carries you through and ties it up at the end. And I'll just read a couple examples of that. A poem early in the book called Young, Black, and Gay ends this way. I'm ironic and yet I'm so on it. So if you want to test me, let me hear your phonics. I'm not a battle MC, I'm a community defender. Young, black, and gay, you best remember. There's some other great endings of poems with the rhymes. This poem called Fatherless Nations ends with this stanza. There are others like he and others like me, so let's not allow a looping history. Fathers, be there for your creations. Help rebuild the fatherless nations. That last line, the last couplet. Fathers, be there for your creations. Help rebuild the fatherless nations. I like that. The meter also plays a role there, obviously. Help rebuild the fatherless nations. It's a trochaic meter. It's falling meter, they'd say, because it's stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, and then it's technically too unstressed because fatherless. But help rebuild the fatherless nations. So it feels like you're falling down the stairs into that rhyme. And sorry for reading all these poem excerpts. I tend to jump around. I have a focus. I'll just discuss this right now. I have a focus usually when I approach a poetry book. I read in a way that I love and appreciate little moments. Little single lines or little, single moments in the poem. I've got a couple lines I'm going to quote that are just one line taken out of context. Some of you may read poetry in a bit different way. I think actually Dean's poetry, it does encourage a bit more of a holistic reading. And so my approach of saying, hey, let's look at the last stanza by itself. Let's look at this one line by itself. It maybe doesn't entirely make sense with this book as much as with some other books. But hey, this is how I get excited about poetry. But Dean's work does have a lot of narrative and stuff. A lot of these poems are 2-3 pages long. I want to read this love poem. In the middle and later part of the book, there's a lot of love poetry, and also just sort of hookup poetry that describes these various sexual encounters. These poems are cool because they give voice to the gay male experience in various places. There was a poem about being in Italy or somewhere and using Grindr. Oh my God, there's a great line about Grindr. I think it was an internal rhyme that said, I'll find it exactly. Here it is. Here's the line. I log on to Grindr, iPhone gay sex finder. Yep, there's an app for that. Didn't come to Rome for this. Random sex isn't something that I miss. It goes on from there. This poem's called Tunnel Vision, near the end of the book here. Tunnel Vision. Forget lights, tunnels, silver linings. I want time travel and you. They say there's a better man for me, and I'll find him. But I don't want someone new. Forget my tears and forget yours. Forget my fears and closing train doors. Forget hotel rooms and gone too soon's. Been so longs. Poems and love songs, forget all my words, yes, even this verse, and meet me again, and kiss me like the first time. I can't see light at the end of this tunnel if you stand there with him. Forget all my words, yes, even this verse. Forget this poem. I want time travel and you was a good line from that. Okay. Some other great love poem moments in this book. There's a poem on called My Love, and the beginning has all kind of interesting stuff going on. It starts off, my love is amnesia, never knowing its home. I met you in a club and dumped you by poem. My love rhymes with everything. And then it goes on from there, but I want to discuss this, like, I met you in a club and dumped you by poem. And that's actually a line that comes back later in the poem, sort of like a chorus. And dumped you by poem. I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to actually share this story that one time I accidentally dumped someone that I was with by changing my MSN profile to say single. Because I was like working myself up to it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna break. So it wasn't an accidental that I broke up but I didn't mean to do it by changing my profile. I meant to do it the next day in person. I was gonna break up, and I was, but I was building myself up the courage to do it, because that's not an easy thing to do, to break up with somebody. You're gonna hurt their feelings, and that's gonna be an awkward moment. It could be a painful moment. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it. And so I went and I changed my MSN profile to single. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. But then she noticed before the next day, then she called me. And she's like, why does your MSN profile say single? And then I had to say, Oh, because I was gonna dump you tomorrow. So that was a rare experience that I had that this poem reminded me of. But I dumped you by poem is actually one of the wildest things to consider. If you dumped somebody in a poem, like why do you show them the poem straight up? Do you like be like I wrote this poem last night and I need to show you because well our relationship status will change due to it, or do you publish it in a zine and then send the contributor copy to their house? Do you publish it in McSweeney's literary journal and then get it sent to their house? How do you do this? And it's kind of funny. I kind of want to have more explanation. If I was interviewing Dean right now, I would ask him about that. Maybe I'll get that knowledge from Dean, and then I'll be able to share that in the later episode or something. Okay, there's also a great line in that poem where it said, "My love is this, the fifth fucking draft of a poem trying to describe my love." Boom, Dean. What else can I say? What else can I show you about this book? Yes. I wanted to read this poem called Ascension. Ascension. I rise, I have risen, and yet I feel like I'm falling from grace, falling short of my potential, falling out of favor with those who expected, predicted, were counting on so much for me and my future. If this is the future, take me back to the past, when I had hopes, dreams, and ambitions, and not just debts, regrets, and not quite yets. When a blank page offered up infinite possibilities, not just a potential paycheck, and an escape from a job where I get no respect. And yet I rise to positions of responsibility and accountability. I rise to capitalist desires, not at school waiting for playtime, but at work waiting for payday, daydreaming of a play date, where butterflies would lift off from a pit of acid, rise and make noise in the form of words, strung together as a puppeteer connects to a puppet. I rise to the occasion. I have been cocooned too long. My flight is imminent. I boil over in a storm. And though torrential rain may descend upon me, the same water that sustains my being and form, I rise above and beyond, standing on the wings of the butterfly, and treading the raindrops like a stairway to heaven. And so, although they fall, I rise, like the towers that scrape the skies. Though oxygen is thin up here, I stand tall while others crawl and gasp for breath. I breathe the air of the gods, filled with stardust and plane emissions. I don't need an engine for my ascension. I rise from sleep and depression, and found all other psychological conditions remained, and within a system of liars the truth seemed like insanity. So how do I defy gravity? I rise free from my former inhibitions to realize the only opinions that matter to me are that of God and my mother. See a clear destination and a strong foundation. Won't stop precipitation, but when you understand the cycle, you don't fear it any more than a river fears evaporation. The sea has been in the sky, so why can't I? I rise, I fall, and through it all, I learn to linger a little higher. So that poem really stuck out to me for a few different reasons. I mean, it's uplifting. It's insisting on this ascension, which I like. It's positive. Dean has that vibe in general. It's spiritually hopeful. Dean's poetry is filled with love and hope. I like that about Dean. But this poem, I also like it for other reasons, and the language is interesting. The sea has been in the sky, so why can't I? Really love that. The sea has been in the sky, so why can't I? There's this moment about, treading the raindrops upward. And treading the raindrops like a stairway to heaven. And so although they fall, I rise, like the towers that scrape the skies. You're in the rain, and yet you are like running up the rain. We're walking up the rain. Dean, that's the Dean life. Okay. Here's a poem called More Than This. This is a one-page poem. It's a little rare in the book. Most poems are a little longer. I knew, before we'd even spoken, my skinny jean-clad punk rock poet, tattooed and pierced, painted and punctured, denim, metal, and ink, pint glass in one hand, poem in the other. Mouthfuls of beer dislodge illicit imagery and forbidden metaphors, crumpled A4 sheet casually discarded as the last lyrics leave his lips. He leaves me naked, on a tobacco and cannabis speckled rug, on his living room floor, wrapped up in a blanket, damp with semen, lubricant, and the cold tea we spilled in our frantic lovemaking. I've got to go to work, he says. You can let yourself out. I guess it's nice to know I can get what I want, but maybe I should want more than this. Okay. Guess this has been a long discussion already. So, please give me your feedback. Tell me, what would make you actually want to listen to this regularly and what would make you not. I don't know if you're listening to this on the website, if you're listening to it elsewhere. I'm going to try to get it on iTunes and all that. But if you go to the website, readpoetryanddie.com, in the comment section there, I really want to get people to the site to comment because that will be like a place where y'all can definitely cross-connect a little bit easier and we can have discussions as a group. Talk to me about the poetry, comment to me about the poetry, what you like or dislike, or other poets that remind you of, or anything, I want to feature comments and stuff on the next show. On each show I want to read aloud some comments from the last show. I want to really draw attention to the comment section because I really want this show to be a way to build community, build and deepen community and friendships. And wow, there's a feeling that I get when I've been talking for a really long time by myself aloud here. I feel that I need to shut up. I need to shut up and and just let something else speak, whether it's another person or just the birds or whatever. I love you. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked this. Have a good day. A real good day, actually.